Welcome to a new Voltlog. For today we're going to be taking a look at this True RMS auto-ranging bench multimeter from Aneng, but as we know, we typically find the Aneng meters being sold under other names as well, different colors. So for example, this one is also available under the model name ZT5566 and ZT5566SE. Which I'm not really sure, but might be able to provide spoken measurements via its built-in speaker, while the standard model I have here only has Bluetooth speaker functionality. And yep, you've heard that right, this is a multimeter combined with a Bluetooth speaker. This unit was provided for free by Banggood.com for the purpose of this review, and if you'd like to order one after watching this video, please consider using the link I've placed in the description of the video. So this is a 20,000 count meter, and the DC voltage accuracy is 0.05% plus 3 counts, DC current 0.5% plus 3 counts, an update rate of about 3 measurements per second. It can also do ohms, capacitance, diode, continuity, frequency, and duty cycle. There is no CAT safety rating printed on this meter. They probably don't bother with that anymore, but we should be able to evaluate the general safety measures later in our teardown. I don't really see myself playing music on this Bluetooth speaker while working in the lab. It's just not something that I do, but I could definitely play one of my favorite podcasts while working on some electronics, like for example the Amp Hour show, which I often listen to while assembling or debugging boards.
This is the Amp Hour podcast, released August 1st, 2021. Episode 552.
First impression, the meter is bigger than expected. I mean, just look at the 3D renderings they were showing on the box. Like it looks like it's very thin here. Well, it does have some decent depth to it in real life. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because this is a benchtop multimeter and it should be more stable because it's deeper. If you are interested in multimeters, you are probably also doing PCB design, so let me introduce the sponsor of this video, which is Altium, one of the most advanced PCB design softwares on the market. Altium has some pretty advanced features which enable collaboration among multiple team members, so there is no wonder they're a popular choice in the professional PCB design world. Check out the link I've placed in the description below to visit their website. Plastic quality feels like typical Aneng quality. Not great, but not terrible either. It's all plastic. There are some rubber feet on the bottom, and the buttons on the front are rubber, but the rotary encoder knob is also plastic, and it feels kind of cheap because it just wiggles in here. It's not a premium feeling. We got these two speakers on the side of the meter, and they are protected by this black mesh, which no doubt is gonna get dirty on the workbench. You're probably gonna get some flux fumes in there and some dust, but I've got to say this design is not bad at all. I quite like the looks of this meter. On the back we do get some buttons. We have the charging port, which is mini USB. That's not ideal. I mean, if you're not going to use USB Type-C, which is a modern thing and everyone has a USB Type-C cable now, at least use one of the older USB Type-B ports, which are more rugged, and you would expect to find those on a bench instrument. The battery compartment is also on the back, and this uses two 18650 batteries. You have the option of ordering a full set or get it without the batteries. I just ordered the full set and it came with these Yanai batteries. I don't know, are these no name, or I haven't heard of this brand before, but you can order it without any batteries and populate with your choice of battery brands. I quite like that the LCD of this meter is white on black. The digits are big and crisp, and it's easy to read them under my bright video shooting lights, but this is at its max brightness setting. You can adjust the brightness to lower intensity levels, but I don't know why anyone would want to do that, because if you start lowering the brightness, it becomes unusable. So I think most people will use it at its max brightness setting. And the viewing angles are pretty good. Sideways you get excellent viewing angles, but this LCD is definitely designed to be viewed from the top, because you do get this excellent viewing angles from the top, but it starts to get very bad if you try to look at it from below. Yeah, so it becomes basically invisible. So you'd probably want this meter at bench level, so you would always have this top view angle on the LCD. There are also a couple of tilting feet on the back, but due to this incredibly bad design, it's almost impossible to remove these without the help of a tool. So yeah, you need to use something sharp. But after opening these tilting feet, it does give the meter a pretty nice stand on the workbench. I quite like these. There is an auto standby function. After 15 minutes, the meter will turn off and display the clock on the main screen and temperature/battery charge state on the secondary screen. To disable the auto standby feature, I believe you have to press the rel button while turning the meter on, and it should disable this icon on screen. Inside the meter you get a user manual, a mini USB charging cable, and 2 sets of test probes. The first one is like a standard set of test leads, but surprisingly this has some very soft cables. They really feel like silicone cabling, and I'll try to do a temperature test with the soldering iron later to confirm that this is silicone insulation. There are no markings, however, on the cable, but that's kind of the standard in this price range, and I'm quite surprised that they use these soft cables. You also get a second set of test leads with some accessories, a couple of cheap screwdrivers, a couple of crocodile clips, and some banana plugs, but these feel like a set of those cheap test leads. They are not as soft as the first set. These are probably just PVC coated, but they do offer some flexibility by having these accessories for connection. There is a set of buttons on the back of the meter, including the power on button, which is not ideal, but it's probably something you could get used to because it's physically bigger than the other buttons and it's located to the side of the row of buttons. So I would say it's probably something I could get used to. Then there are buttons for controlling the secondary display, for switching between Celsius and Fahrenheit degrees, for adjusting the clock, and for adjusting the brightness. The buttons on the front are pretty self-explanatory, and I quite like their layout, how they are spaced, and generally you can press them without having the meter slide on the workbench, which is quite a good design. The input jack location is just perfect in my opinion, and they are standard spacing, so you could plug in accessories like this one with no problem. The continuity tester is latched. It's not super fast, but definitely good enough and above average, and for most purposes it's going to be good enough. From what I've seen, it's an upgrade from all of the previous Chinese meters that I've tested. The bar graph display is not a fast updating one like on some professional multimeters. It just updates together with the rest of the display at around 3 times per second. There is no warning if you have the test leads inserted into the wrong jack, but that's to be expected in this price range. The AC voltage mode gives out a secondary reading of frequency, which is a nice feature to have. And overall, I would say that there is pretty good functionality built into this meter, and the GUI performs pretty much as you would expect. I would say that this is a well-designed multimeter interface. Now a few words about the Bluetooth speaker functionality. It seems to connect pretty fast, and it's not one of those annoying things that just talks in a weird accent. It's just a simple beep to let you know it's connected, and the icon stops blinking on the LCD. After connection, you can just play stuff like to a regular Bluetooth speaker, and the volume is pretty decent for a small room like I have here, but it won't win any prize for audio quality or power output. It's a modest entry-level Bluetooth speaker type of thing. In terms of accuracy, I won't bore you with all of the details, but I did check its accuracy by comparing with some of the other meters I have here, like the Agilent 34401A, and by measuring some of the voltage and resistance and current standards that I have here, and it pretty much follows specified accuracy. There are no issues whatsoever, but the specs were not so great to start with, so I would say that it's pretty easy to meet these specs on a multimeter. I'm not sure how battery charging is handled on this meter, what happens if you constantly keep it connected to power, but we'll get a better look at that during the teardown, which I will start right now. Now this is a nice surprise. The construction is very nice and clean, everything is tidy. They've used connectors on these cables running to the speaker box and to the back of the unit. They've used this insulation foam on the cables to prevent them from rattling inside the case, so I quite like what I'm seeing here. This is the thermistor they used for measuring temperature, and it does have a specific spot to slide into the enclosure. This is the relay. I was hearing click when switching ranges. We've got two protection fuses, one for the low current range and one for the high current range. I would assume that, yeah, based on the markings on the PCB, this is a 200 milliamps fuse, while this one is a 20 amps fuse. Also for protection, we've got a varistor and a bunch of MULF resistors, as well as diodes in series with the inputs. And we clearly have the multimeter part isolated on the left side of this board. And this is run by a classic chip. This is the DTM 0660L. This is a dedicated multimeter chip. And this is a pretty popular chip. It's used among many low-cost multimeters. It stores its configuration in the external EEPROM, which is located here on the board. So it's pretty easy to hack this to enable other functions like UART output, for example. However, there is one big question mark here. This is only a 6000 count capable chip according to its datasheet, so they either have an upgraded version of this chip, or I don't know how they are getting the 20,000 counts on this meter. There is a second chip in here. This one is unmarked, but it's pretty clear what its purpose is, judging by these many connections to the LCD segments. This is in charge of driving the LCD panel, and I don't think this is a dedicated chip. This could be just a microcontroller program to drive the LCD segments. And why do I say that? Well, because there is an identical chip on the Bluetooth side of this board, and I suspect this is just a microcontroller, and they've used the second one to basically control the Bluetooth side of the circuit. Another interesting find is this DC to DC converter module, which I didn't expect to see in here in this price range, but this means the USB interface is galvanically isolated from the multimeter, so this makes it safe to have it connected to your computer for power. However, you will not gain any data interface through that USB interface. I believe this is used just for power. It's a nice addition nonetheless, which increases safety. There are also a couple of opto isolator chips in here. I'm not sure what these are used for. They could be used for a communication interface between these two chips. Maybe it's an I2C interface. I don't know why they would need to do that. but we'll see if we find anything else interesting inside the other half of this meter. With the Bluetooth part on this right side of the board, we spot the aforementioned MCU chip. Then we have a typical Chinese made Bluetooth chip, which you can find on AliExpress Bluetooth type modules. It's implemented directly on the PCB with an F-type antenna to save costs. And the audio output from this chip is amplified with what looks like a stereo class D amplifier. I'm not even gonna bother to look that up. I'm pretty sure it's a class D amplifier. I don't think there is anything else on the bottom of this board other than the LCD panel. So let's continue our teardown into the other half of the meter, where I expect to find the speakers plus an additional board on the back to handle battery charging and reading of those buttons on the back. I quite like how the speaker assembly is one complete unit and just removes from the enclosure. So we got a couple of speakers plus a passive woofer membrane on the bottom, but as you can see there are no vents on the bottom of this case. So yeah, I'm not really sure how effective that is. I guess it can also vent air through these side vents, so maybe it does something, I'm not sure. And here's the PCB, which handles the battery charging and the USB input. Let's remove that from the case and take a closer look. So once again, a nice touch. They've used connectors for the battery terminals, connectors between this board and the main board. Once again, I'm surprised by the construction quality and the nice attention to detail in this multimeter. We can see they have implemented a full battery protection circuit with the required battery monitoring chip, as well as the MOSFETs for cutting power, and a switching battery charging circuit. And they've dedicated a PCB for this purpose on the back of the unit. I'm sure many of you are curious about the power consumption of this meter and how long it will last on batteries. Well, I've done some measurements and the meter uses 89 milliamps with Bluetooth connected and up to 105 milliamps with Bluetooth disconnected. I'm guessing the Bluetooth module does some scanning, so it uses up more power, or maybe the audio amp uses more power when there is no input from the Bluetooth module. I'm not sure on that. Now, while the meter is in standby showing the clock like it is right now, I've measured 89 milliamps, and while turned off from the button on the back, I've measured just 30 microamps, which is not bad. However, the clock display standby mode doesn't provide any power savings, so it's the same as having the meter on taking measurements. Now, this uses two 18650 batteries connected in series. There is no capacity marking on the provided batteries, but let's assume a typical value of 2.5 amp hours. That will give you a runtime of roughly 24 hours on a full set of batteries, as long as you don't listen to music while doing measurements. The clock standby time will be similar, and a power off time of 9.5 years. The batteries will probably self-discharge well before that. And now to give you my final thoughts on this multimeter, I was pleasantly surprised by the construction quality. The Bluetooth speaker part surprisingly is not just a gimmick, it actually works pretty well, and the sound quality is decent. So it's perfectly usable in the lab. The display is nice. It has big digits. It's easy to read it. It has all of the measurement functions that you would need for general purpose usage. The USB power input is galvanically isolated, so there is no risk of blowing up your PC if you choose to power this from a USB port. The standard test lead it comes with are silicon cabling. I've tested this with the soldering iron at 300 degrees Celsius and they don't melt, so that's a first from these Chinese supplied multimeters. What I don't like about this is the fact that you do not have a PC connection or any data logging capability. Maybe they could have done that through Bluetooth by switching its operating mode. I don't know. It would sure have increased the multimeter cost if they would have done that over USB, because it's quite expensive to do USB data isolation. I also don't like the charging port, which is mini USB. That's now an obsolete type of USB port. They could have used USB Type-C. And the input protection could have been improved by having the fuses more easily accessible, because you have to remove the front panel, you have to get inside the meter to exchange the fuses. They also could have had more input protection devices like varistors on the input, but let's not forget that this is already an improvement over previous Chinese meters I've taken apart, and there are a lot of good things to be said about this meter and not a lot of bad things. Like I've mentioned numerous times before, these Chinese-made products are improving with each iteration. They're getting better and better, and not just technically, but also design-wise. I think this is a pretty good-looking multimeter. Banggood.com are currently having a special price on this meter, so I think it's worth considering their offering if you are looking to get one, especially in the EU, because it's available in their Poland warehouse. That was all for today. I would really appreciate your feedback in the comments below. Let me know what you think of this meter and how you would use the Bluetooth functionality on your electronics workbench. It would certainly be interesting to take a look at the other variant that can apparently speak the measured value over Bluetooth. But until then, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.